With our thanks and praise, Jim. Wonderfully done. I'd like to invite our three other panelists to come up, and for the next little while, we have an opportunity for questions. And Jenny has, and others have 3x5 cards. And if you'd like to write a question and hand it in, we'll also have a question and discussion period after Professor Bahat's presentation, which will come after a short break here. He will start at 10:30. So if we don't get to all of the questions in this session, we'll be able to pick those up later as well. While the questions are being picked up, maybe we could begin by people testing the microphone. It's always important. And let's be sure that works. And I wondered if we could begin with any questions that, or requests for clarification that any of our panelists might want to begin with. So, would any of you like to start? Gary, the Psalms were used quite a bit here. Any reactions you might have to where we are right now in the discussion and where you might want to be going with your paper later, starting at 1 today? It's not on? Okay, there we go.
Now it's on, right?
Good.
I'll save most of what I have to say about the Psalms for this afternoon, and I'll just leave it at that. But I just wanted to, my first words when I sat down next to Jim were kol hakavod, Hebrew for literally all honor. Just such a wonderful presentation. So, I mean, there's just so many places to go. But let's have people from the audience. I think it'll be
sure. And those will be coming up. Hi, yes, Dan, go ahead.
Just two remarks. One of them about the money changes. Professor Charlesworth spoke about the Tyrian coins, the coins which come from Tyre. The reason for the coins coming from Tyre, in spite of the fact that they've got a foreign god, and also on the back side it had an eagle, which is also an impure bird. And you are surprised, why did it come to the temple? Very simple. When the Jews used to use a half silver shekel, which was made of pure silver shekel. By the way, in Hebrew, like in Spanish and in French, the word for silver and money is the same word because the coins were always struck from silver. And the point is that the city of Tyre, all its coins were always pure silver. The Jewish coins, the Jewish silver, succumbed to inflation. In other words, what does it mean succumb to inflation? Whenever there was inflation, they inserted more copper into the coins. The coins stopped to be silver, pure silver. Therefore, since the temple lived on this half silver shekel, then by bringing Jewish coins, it will reduce the amount of income, of the annual income to the temple, and just thus frustrate the function of the temple as the most important economical institution in the country, which was responsible for making roads, bridges, aqueducts, and so on. What did they do? They brought from Tyre amount of silver coins because they were pure silver, and thus this is the function of the money changers, to change the coins. If I go with my family and bring the silver shekels, the money changer says no, or the priest says no, your coins are worth less. Go to the money changers and buy with your silver shekels, the Tyrian silver shekels, which are pure, and bring them to me. And so they manage, in spite of the inflation in the Roman world, they managed to keep the same level of income to the annual income to the temple. Moreover, when Tyre also started to mint coins and put copper inside, in Jerusalem was founded a mint which continued to mint silver shekels of Tyre, I mean the same form, but in Jerusalem, and they were responsible that these coins will be pure silver. I see the story of the money changers and Jesus' objection to the money changers, not because he had something against the money changers. He had something against the temple, but not in the sense that the temple is bad. He wanted to show, exactly as Jeremiah, you are sinning, then you go to the temple, you sacrifice, and you think that you are atoned. No, the temple is not a place for atonement for people who are sinning. And by being against it, he pulled the carpet from under the temple as an institute where you can play around, with sins and then to be atoned by it. The temple for him was really much greater value. You remember, I'm an archaeologist, I'm not a theologian, but this is the way I understand it. The other thing which I want to say, and I'll tell you a very interesting story, and I'm putting just a small word of politics today, just a small word. The story is when you see the Dome of the Rock, this golden dome structure in Jerusalem, as you probably know, it was built in the 7th century, and the point is, and soon you'll see how I connect it to the present story. The point is that today the Muslim says the Jews were never there, the temple was never there. They keep forgetting two things. This great monument, which is one of the most exciting monuments in the Islamic world, was built by Christians. It was built by Christians because the Arabs or savages coming from the Arabian Peninsula, you know how they are, you have to see the news today. They could not build such a thing. So they employed, and we've got a story of a bishop who was expert in cutting marble. He put the marble slabs which are still existing in the Dome of the Rock. Why do I tell you that? Because inside the decoration, the mosaic, which is Byzantine, also made exactly the same style as the mosaics in Ravenna, contemporary by the way, there are royal crowns in the decoration. Why royal crowns? Because they knew that the temple which they replaced by the Dome of the Rock was built by David the altar and Solomon the temple. It was royalty, and therefore royalty continued by the decoration of the royal crown. And the last thing, how do I connect it to the story? One of the things which I'd like, and I'll be happy if somebody comments, remember that Matthew starts with the genealogy of Jesus through David. I think that also an important factor in Jesus in Jerusalem is in the temple. He's a descendant in a way of David and Solomon, the builder, and Solomon, the builder of the temple. And I think that this is also an important thing to the connection Jesus and temple. About the rest, I'll talk later.
Okay.
Can I add a footnote just on the coins, and Dan will either correct me or agree with me, but even at Qumran, where the Dead Sea Scrolls were found, the cache of coins that were found there are also Tyrian shekels. It's a question whether they are intended as the temple tax to be paid, which the Qumran community paid only once in a lifetime, not annually, because of their opposition to the temple, or whether those coins were in fact the pooled wealth of the Qumran community, which we know was part of the Essene tradition, is not clear. But the Qumran also has these Tyrian coins. It's quite remarkable.
Yes. Just
okay.
The story is that a Jew could not live with the money to the temple. I don't know if you heard about it, but in excavations which were carried out by many years ago, in the destruction of the city, which is called Eshtemoa, mentioned a lot in the Old Testament, in this city, in the destruction layer of Nebuchadnezzar, 586 BC, was found a little juglet which was heavy. We had to sew it in the laboratories of the museum to see what was inside. And what was found, that actually it was a block of silver, which originally was smaller pieces, which were stuck together because of the fire. But when the jug was sewed and you could take it out, few pieces fell down. All the pieces were half silver shekel, which means that tradition, Judaism follows the temple fee, which by the way, later the Romans, after the destruction of the temple, ordered the Jews to continue and pay to the Roman Empire, and it was called Fiscus Judaicus, the money of the Jews. But I want to show that the tradition of the silver shekel goes so deeply in Judaism, you cannot imagine Jesus not referring to it.
Okay. We have a couple questions about the cleansing of the temple or Jesus' disapproval and outrage, angry response. I've got to be careful what I call it after what Professor Charlesworth said about it, but here are the questions that maybe Jim, you could talk about, or other people. First of all, a question asks, were there two cleansings of the temple? And with this in mind, in John chapter 2, Jesus does not there call the people robbers or creating a problem there, making the temple a house of robbers. And if that's the case, might he have issued some kind of a warning the first time? And maybe his final outburst is not the first time that he's expressed disapproval, but it was the most dramatic time, saying, if you will, that Jesus has warned them and talked to them about this before, and they simply aren't listening or changing. So his outburst may have been understandable in the sense that he is kind of impatient with them and knows that he doesn't have much more time. So with that in mind, the question also asks, what more can you say about the character of Christ from his outburst at the temple? And you want to comment a little further on that, Jim?
We have the so-called cleansing of the temple in John 2, which is put at a different time than the synoptics. And if John is right, he's been in the area for many months. He could have done it at the beginning, not of his ministry, but the beginning of his Judean ministry. This has to be looked at with great care. One could argue that there were two cleansings, or you could argue there was one cleansing, but two explanations of it, and I lean more to the latter. One cleansing, but different evangelists bring in their own theology.
Okay. A question about money again. Can you elaborate a little bit more on the copper scroll and what we learn new from what will be coming in this next translation? How much money was in the temple according to that scroll?
How many days do you have? Next year's conference should be on the copper scroll and the temple. We'll get Kyle McCarter to come and others like Gary, specialists on the scrolls. The previous work on the copper scroll, Kyle McCarter said, has 15% of the text. He says now we have 85% of the text. I took the Zuckermans into Amman, and I was the one that touched the scroll, and we took images, we digitized it, and we have much more readings. So I can't share with you how much more we have, but Kyle McCarter said we've gone from 50 to 85%. Frank Cross told me, choose Kyle McCarter because he knows more about topography than anyone. And the copper scroll is telling you topographically where things are hidden. Now, there is a debate, it's a pure fake, Milik. That it is.
The scroll is real, the money is fake.
Yeah, the scroll is clearly real, but the money is a fake. It's a fake story. Now, I would side with those who say it is a real story. First of all, I made the point about the temple not being only a place to worship, but the World Bank. Secondly, I've made the point that the price of gold drops in the Levant after 70. Third is that sure, hyperbole is a part of ancient writing, but indeed the amount that is given may not be as excessive as we thought. We're getting to realize that this is an incredible building. There is no building like it in Rome. And Josephus, who's been in Rome, remember, he's been there. He's been to Rome. He's now writing in Rome, and he says, people who have not seen the royal stoa have not seen a great building. This is amazing. the buildings in Rome are nothing. And you think, wait a minute, I do remember Nero burning Rome. Well, you're not going to burn stone. So much of Rome was wood, but we don't want to go into that lecture about Roman architecture, which I get very excited about because I've lived there many times and was a professor there. I have been with Barjo Pixner down into a cistern, and in the copper scroll it says, in the elegant cistern that has a huge pillar in the middle of it. Now I did go down and I went through a ladder, and he says, what do you see? I see an elegantly constructed cistern. It's in the Zion area where, the Domitian Abbey is. And he says, what do you see? I said, I find a massive pillar in the middle. And I said, the only thing I can explain is that it's harder stone than the other around it, and they just left it. Now you'll say, well, how much gold did you find? The Romans were there for centuries. Now, during the time from 66 to 70, slowly but slowly, Titus and his troops allowed Jews to leave if you were not fighting. Well, they would swallow the gold rings. They would swallow other things that were precious, like gold coins. And the Romans saw the Jews over there digging through their excrement. What are they doing? The next thing is the Jew comes out and they slit him open and find the gold. So obviously there was gold being taken out, but more importantly, gold being found by Roman soldiers. Now, if you read the copper scroll, it says at the end, and this is another copy. Now, remember, I can't imagine anybody who knows it's a fake spending infinite time who really doesn't know Hebrew very well. It's not Qumran. It's not related to Qumran at all. My teacher said to me, I want to show you cave 3. Way back in the back, we found Qumran documents. But here on the ledge is where I found the copper scroll. It's not related to Qumran for every reason you can think of. Frank Cross would say, a Qumran didn't write it because the Hebrew's so bad. So I can't imagine anybody who's not good with Hebrew working so hard to pound in letters on copper.
Okay.
2 remarks. So
One final comment.
Yes. One of them, you can't imagine the damage the copper scroll made. Because when the West Bank, Judah and Samaria was under Jordan, they took it seriously and they started to dig in a wild way in order to look for the treasures. And so they did in Herodium. They destroyed some of the famous tombs in the Kedron Valley in Jerusalem and so on. That's very bad. The other thing,
Nothing was found.
Nothing was found, of course. Because if it says that you have got a treasure, which means on the way you go from Bet Shean south on the left-hand side under the tree, try to look for it today. At any rate, the other thing which I want to say, which I think is very important on the comment that Professor Charlesworth said, the amount of the money in Jerusalem was great. Some years ago, a German scholar read an inscription which is found in the Colosseum in Rome. The Colosseum in Rome is the monument of the Roman world. And there is found that the inscription was dedicated to the memory of the Christians who suffered in the Colosseum, in the amphitheater. But he saw that on the stones are holes. And it was a genius idea that those holes are pegs by which bronze letters were attached to it, and it was the lintel of the Colosseum. And he went home, he photographed it with a computer, he removed the Christian inscription and left only the dots, those holes, and he managed to reconstruct the letters by the shape of the letter. For example, if there is an A, there should be 5 points. If there is an I, there should be 2. He started to reconstruct, and it is amazing. This great theater, then it amphitheater, was built by Vespasian and Titus by the money they took from the war they had. The only war they had was the war against the Jews. In other words, all the great monument of the Roman world was made by Jewish money. We've got to take the Colosseum and bring it back to Jerusalem.
And all of that certainly puts into perspective Professor Charlesworth's point about the importance of not turning the temple into an emporium, a commercial place, and making money the main objective of bringing that together. One last comment,
Just
Gary?
a 20-second comment, because Jim quoted Josephus' description of the temple, and you may say, well, a Jew will be biased to refer to it in such a fashion. His contemporary, Pliny the Elder, the Roman historian, naturalist, and admiral, visited Jerusalem as well and called it the greatest city in the East, and also described its splendor. So an independent, non-Jewish Roman testimony to the wonders of Jerusalem at the time when the temple was still standing.
Excellent. All right, we'll take a 15-minute break and look forward to hearing then next from Professor Dan Bahat. And he'll have a PowerPoint with lots of wonderful things. I can't imagine a better person to take us on a tour of the Temple Mount coming up right next.